because what lusting is that strife, it's a struggle to find that sort of a belonging and the satisfaction and the fulfillment of our original curse of knowledge. It's power struggle. It is a belonging struggle. It's power struggle.
And I would link it too with the whole concept of rejection, because power means I have control. I have control over everything. And rejection tends to be the opposite of that.
Right.
And so when I'm drawn into a pornography world, I know in that place I can't be rejected.
Okay, everybody, welcome back again to another Honest J interview. And today here we have Andy Sieberhagen back on the interview. And it is awesome to have him back here. If you have not seen the first interview that we did, which was actually my very first interview. Actually, I feel bad about that one, Andy, because like the recording, like the content is so good, and then just the quality of the recording and stuff. Like, man, I wish we could have had a better.
I was part of the birth of something.
Oh yeah, no, okay, that's great. That's a good response back.
I was the first one, so I'll take that.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good response back. See, this is the optimism and the attitude that keeps us moving on. So, but anyway, we're great to have Andy back here. If you have not seen that first interview, we're talking about some serious stuff, our journey to inner healing, and finding the truth in our memories, in our traumas, in our pain, in our lives. So the first part we called it how the truth specifically sets us free. You know what Jesus says, I am the truth and the truth shall set you free. But there are some incredible stories on how that actually happens. So you need to check that out. On part 2, we also talked about, discovering lies that are residing within us that makes us sin. I received great insights out of all these things, so you need to definitely check that out. And today we wanted to get a bit more honest and vulnerable in regards to this topic of a man's quest for intimacy. So, I mean, when I say man, I am sure it is not only men, but women as well. Like, we are all in this place of seeking intimacy as how primal that really is to our human being. And that was something that is really intriguing, that really got me thinking, and I'm really thankful to be able to talk about this stuff with you in the Christian perspective as well, because going back into the garden and knowledge and shame and what that means, we're gonna explore into that, and hopefully hoping and praying to find insights that will help us to identify the struggle that we are having, majority of men. And and as much as this it is a costful thing for me to title this channel as Honest J, I am, as sad as it sounds, I am not able to approach this from a position and place where I can say I have complete victory or healing over this right now in this time, because if you were to ask me if I was able to not sin against the Lord in regards to this matter in the past 6 months, and I cannot give you a triumphant answer to that. But as we try to be an optimist in all of this journey, it makes you think, it makes you think. And I'm sure that it makes many people think about what is it that I really want out of this? What is going on here? And is there a solution? Is there really hope in regards to the complete healing over this? Yeah, there was a long introduction, but Andy, again, he is lead pastor of Heritage Christian Church in Ohio, and welcome back, Andy. Great to have you.
Thank you, Jay. Yeah. And just, in your introduction there, just one or two comments to you. One thing that a truth is that our sin doesn't define us, right? So I'm not defined by my sin. And the moment I actually know and understand that truth, it already helps me with vulnerability and honesty. Just as you were vulnerable for a moment there. in some ways that speaks to your security and the fact that you aren't defined by any sin. You know, you already know your identity, and I think that deals a blow to shame, which we'll speak more about. But I think shame keeps our brokenness hidden and doesn't allow us to be honest and vulnerable when really we want to be. But shame doesn't allow us. So already it speaks to something of your journey of understanding your identity, that you even speak to your own vulnerability.
That's great. That's great.
That's encouraging to me. Yeah.
That is great. Yeah.
I actually think, you know, pornography and sexual struggle is, you know, it's man and woman, but as a man, especially for men, I actually think this is the hidden killer of the church, the hidden poison that never gets spoken of, never gets dealt with, and it's just crippling men, it's paralyzing men, it's preventing men from having confidence to do great things for God because they feel so ashamed, you know, so disqualified, and because we're not open and vulnerable and haven't created a place in the church for men to be honest, open and vulnerable, I do think this is probably the enemy's greatest weapon against the church. There are many weapons, but I would say this one is just so deep, and we don't address it, you know, and as long as we pretend it's not there, I think the church is in trouble.
Yeah. And, you know, we talked about this in the last interview as well, but the fact that shame, like our humanity originates with shame, you know, like from when we're talking about our original sin, the moment Adam and Eve had eaten of the fruit, their shame came, you know, and the knowledge and the effect
and
of that.
They hid straight away. They hid. Exactly.
They hid from God, and they hid, you know, and they needed to cover themselves. They needed to cover their vulnerable parts, and that is such a, you know, like the reason why I'm doing this interview with you, Andy, is because how intriguing and how powerful that picture is, and when we think about what that really means, you know, and why the scripture chose to describe knowledge, knowing somebody, as yada, as intimacy, as why it chose to describe sex as yada, as knowing somebody, you know, to know intimately. You know, that once we look into that, you know, we have to draw the parallel that what we are actually struggling with, perhaps this pornography and perhaps this physical lust is just more of a manifestation of the inward struggle of what we're desiring spiritually, you know?
Yes. Yeah, and intimacy, you know, I think when we are setting this up, I love the idea of intimacy is a nice way of saying what intimacy is. It's I want you to look at every part of me, and when you see all of me, you still are willing to accept me and love me for who I am. It feels like in any relationship, when you get to that point where I've seen everything I know about this person, the good, the bad, the ugly, everything there is to see, and I still love them, accept them, don't judge them, we will have found a place of intimacy, which I actually think we all long to find. Right. And I think nakedness to me is just an external, almost symbol of that.
Yeah, right.
You know, and it's interesting. I think before the fall, it would seem to me that Adam would have never looked upon Eve with lustful eyes. He would have seen her beauty in a very different way.
Right.
You know, and
wholesome.
And I think it's so, and it's so symbolic that as the fall happens, shame comes in, they hide. And from then on, the body got sexualized, you know, in a way that wasn't healthy. And that's just what the enemy does. You know, he takes something that God has created beautiful, which is, I mean, our sexuality is God's creation. But the enemy will come and he'll twist it and use it for destruction.
Yeah. And just thinking about how deep really this is to, describing what human is, describing what all creation is with the fall. I've actually made like just a separate video on talking and exploring the idea of this and stuff as well. But for example, like the animal hierarchy, animal kingdom of survival that also wasn't there, before the fall. But as
Yes.
with the fall, we call it the animal instinct, like the guts, like how the predator and the predatee, I don't know, like what the rest of the other ones, how
Yes.
our heightened awareness, and alertness, like just like the moment when Adam and Eve was immediately alerted of their nakedness, and I've been looking at some approaches to this from like a psychological perspective, and it was really intriguing to hear what these people were saying is like, as because of knowledge of good and evil, because of knowledge of evil as well, like they know vulnerability, like the whole world is turned into survival, and they are exposed. And I've been thinking about what sex and intimacy, what Bible chose to describe as intimacy means when we say this, and it is the removing of that cover. We are removing our covers. We are removing our when people engage in sexual activities. We are naturally removing the covers that we have put on for self-protection and self-coverage. And there is an embrace of one another in one another's nakedness.
Yes.
And that is that profound picture of what you just have described as, I see everything of you. I see all of you.
Correct. Yes.
But I
Yes.
embrace it. And you embrace the same vulnerability, the nakedness, with the shame, the ugliness, and everything along the same. And that's what union is. And that is such, for me, I thought that was such a powerful picture, thinking about it that way.
Sure. Yeah. So if we take a moment and ponder whether we've ever thought of that in terms of God and our relationship with Him.
Right.
So if I think of my relationship with God in the sense that He knows everything about me, there's nothing I can hide from Him. He sees everything, and yet He's crazy about me. He loves me madly and deeply, and yet He knows me. He knows me in that intimate way. I feel somehow if we can just connect at that level with Him and understand that, there is a level that we get to with God that I don't think we always know and understand. Because He has found that in me. I've just got to accept that when He looks at me, He sees me that way, and He sees me with, it's like a love affair with Him. There's nothing in me that will stop Him from having this extravagant, deep love for me, and that's where the identity comes in, and as I've thought about struggle with pornography and sexual struggle, I think identity is obviously where it begins, and it's all locked into that relationship. So it's understanding my identity, but then I also look at relationships, meaningful relationships with human beings, and then my relationship with God.
Right.
When my identity is healthy, when I'm living healthy relationships with others, and when I have a healthy relationship with God, I will see pornography in a very different way.
Right.
It will not have the kind of draw that it has in other ways. So if we can just frame it in that way, because then when I am finding myself drawn to it or addicted to it or struggling with it, I need to stop and say that it's very likely that the problem is lying in one of those three places, either my identity, my understanding of my relationship with God, or there's a relationship with some human being that is not in a healthy place. And very often when there's brokenness in one of those three places, pornography is the place that sort of gives me the comfort, or whatever I'm not getting in those other places.
Yes. Because what lusting is it's that strife, it's a struggle to find that sort of a belonging and the satisfaction and the fulfillment of where that part is lacking, right? Because
Correct.
and this is also another very like knowledge, our original curse of knowledge.
Yes.
We have been lusting ever since we have been struggling with knowledge. You know, Francis Bacon himself said knowledge is power, and
Yeah.
lust, pornography, you know, it is all taking vulnerability of one another for their own gain. It is power struggle. It is a belonging struggle. It's power struggle. You know, once we really deep into that, we have to come to a point of, okay, we need to actually start talking about the antithesis of this knowledge. Then, you know, that thing that which originally gave us shame in the first place. So
right. And I would link it too with the whole concept of rejection, because power means I have control. I have control over everything, and rejection tends to be the opposite of that. You know, if I feel I've been rejected by you, I no longer have any power over you or control over you. I've lost something.
Right.
And so when I'm drawn into a pornography world, I know in that place I can't be rejected. You know, so I go after there, and it's usually I've been rejected, or I either feel rejected by God or by some human relationship, and then it takes me there. I go there, you know.
There is no pornography where she just refuses, in a sense.
No, exactly. You know you're going to get your fix there, you know.
Yeah.
And yet there's no intimacy there, zero.
There is
so
no
you get
intimacy.
Your fix.
Yes. So
you get your fix, and then it's such an anticlimax.
Right.
And it just takes you in a downward spiral because it's the promise of everything, and yet it gives you the very opposite every time.
Exactly. So that's what makes men feel after they engage in pornography. There is more shame. There is more loss that is in there.
Takes you back there.
Because chemically speaking, all that it does is just activate your dopamine. But you know, it was just like a little surge of it. I mean, as you have said, the purpose of the whole intimacy is not there. You're missing out. You're missing it, and nobody knows you. Yeah, still. Yeah.
Yes.
And
a guy said something the other day that I thought was so helpful. I wrote it down for this. He said, sin represents the relational separation that drives our unwanted sexual behavior, or any unwanted behavior. You know, sin represents the relational separation that drives unwanted behavior. You know?
I think I would even go with if you were to just write sexual behavior, because the whole idea of lust, you know, it's beyond just sexual, as we talked about.
True. No, exactly.
Lusting is you know, it's not just physical. There is emotional lust as well. There is, it is a lust for power. It is a struggle, a strife for power, you know, and people might hear and say like, oh no, I've never been interested in power. Well, maybe we don't know what power really means to ourselves, you know, but what knowledge means.
You got it.
Yeah.
And I also thought it is important to say too that sexual temptation, it doesn't always mean there's something wrong.
Yeah, in itself.
You know, I think when Jesus taught about it, he warned against it, because he said, you know, this is something common to men. And in Corinthians, he actually says, you know, I'd rather you marry
than to
burn. Than burn with passion. You know, so there is a part of me that is drawn towards sexual temptation. And it's there, so it's a natural thing. I don't think it's saying, well, I'm healthy in every way now, I'm never ever going to have a sexual desire again, or a lustful thought, I think those are thoughts we will have, you know, until we're in heaven. It's just now we have the power to manage them and to overcome and not be ruled or controlled by them.
And
because we see it for what it is.
right, and to utilize it properly in marriage, in the
Yes.
sacredness of marriage. And I remember
Yeah.
this another story which was very interesting. I thought it was really cool. In this book, apparently there was a true story. There was a group of pastors praying together, having a prayer meeting, and then in the middle of the prayer meeting, one older gentleman, senior, like older gentleman, he said, I need you guys to pray for me. And so the guy gathered up and is like, how can we pray for you? And he's like, I'm struggling with lust. I have lust. And then after a little pause, he says, for my wife. You know? And then the rest of the pastors and men look around and they're like, you need to pray for us. You know?
And yet he's spot on, Jay. Isn't that true? Because I think it is possible to lust after your wife where it's all about you
Okay. Yeah.
rather than her.
True.
You know, the minute it's about me satisfying myself, and I've got my own selfish, and my wife needs to satisfy me.
Right.
It becomes about me, and the
Right.
minute it's about me, then lust is just behind that.
Right.
Rather than this is about us and an
Exactly.
expression of intimacy with us.
Right.
And the minute lust gets involved, it's never good, never healthy. And so
Right.
I think it's possible to even lust after your wife. Yeah.
Wow, that's I've never thought about that in that way actually, but it is true. I mean, it's because it is a power struggle again, right? Well, as soon as a self is involved in there, so because what intimacy and what sex really means is the delivery of that message of I see you totally as you are, but I love you and I accept you, I embrace you, and the same message back to yourself as well. You know, it is 100% out, 100% in. So anything outside of that, like anything where there is self that is actually one that wants to grab something out of that, like could we even like define that as what lust is?
Yeah. So if you think of it the way you've just described it, self-gratification is not going to give you intimacy.
Right.
So anything that's driven by self-gratification is always going to end up with an anticlimax and giving you the opposite. So when you've got the union of two becoming one flesh, that's the ultimate, you know, where you experience an act of intimacy, which then gives you that fulfillment. It actually, you arrive at that place where afterwards you feel satisfied. But everything that's self-driven is not going to enable you to get to that place, you know. And I think it's important that we also realize that I think because we live in a sexualized world, the role of sex in intimacy, I think, has been so overemphasized. Like that's the ultimate pinnacle, you know. And yet in some ways, we have no idea. I think sex is just God's a little hint of what the ultimate ecstasy we are going to experience with Him one day when we are one with Him in heaven, you know. We have no idea. We have absolutely no idea of the incredible, just what we will get when we are truly one with Him, and there's nothing that's separated. There's no more sin. There's nothing.
Yeah, because I think
I think we don't even have the first clue of what that's going to be like.
Right. Yeah. I think what we experience here in this physical world here, they are all foreshadowings. You know, they're all mirrors of and the wonder that we find in that. You know, it makes us. I mean, we're talking about the place where we will hear sounds where we have never heard before. We'll see colors we've never seen before.
Yes.
And
that's
the kind of the ultimate hope that we as Christians really rightly look forward to, you know. As much as we talk about your kingdom come here, as going back onto what you were talking about, identity, right? If this is something that we're going to be dealing with, we need to start from inside out, isn't it? We need to first talk about the intimacy of the spirit that can move onto our soul, into our body, which we're talking about union with God eventually, you know, and
Yes. Yes.
because another significant, beautiful picture is that when we talked about, we come to God, we come before God oftentimes with our bushes still clothed on that we made of ourselves.
Yeah.
And sometimes we do all these Christian goody activities or whatnot, whatever, to, you know, to even hide ourselves further from, we're decorating our bushes, self-righteousness. So it's that picture, like only when we actually let go of that, when we lay ourselves down, when we come to ourselves, then we're able to wear that animal skin that God initially provided for Adam and Eve, which is also the foreshadowing prophetic picture of Christ. You know, we're wearing
Yes.
him, we're putting him on, and then that becomes our identity. You know, we were able to stand before him because you're wearing Christ, and that is the sort of the identity that we're talking about here, isn't it?
Yes. No, totally. And again, you know, it's so important that we connect the dots, because so much of what we experience growing up, both in our families and in the faith, kind of shapes how we view our clothes and how we view the way we need to be with God. And a lot of that has to be dismantled.
Right.
Because a lot of our addictions they're sitting back there. They were caused way back when we weren't planning any of that. It's just what we receive.
Right.
And now it plays out in some of our addictions. And, you know, an interesting thing the guy said is that usually there are two family systems that people come out of who struggle with addictions, especially pornography. You've got the one where it's a rigid family. They've got strict rules. This is what you can do, can't do. Very strict, legalistic, very structured. That's the one. And then the other one is there where it's totally disengagement. There's no involvement from parents or father, just no involvement. The level of addiction is the same for both families. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, yeah.
Whether you came out of a totally disengaged family or a rigid, the research is showing that the struggle with sexual addiction is the same.
That's really interesting, because that is kind of like a symbolism of legalism one side and licentiousness on the other side.
Yeah, so think about it. So the one who came out of a rigid system, what are they struggling with? Well, they are the golden boy. You know, they never do anything wrong. They self-righteous. They've got to put up a good image. Well, try do that. You know, it's like the older brother in the prodigal son, you know. And so when you are the golden child and you fail, then it's a total mess. And you end up going to your addiction because you can't live up to the standards that have been set for you. When you're the black sheep, when you've just gone and thrown it, you've got a much easier road back than if you're the golden child, you know.
Right.
So I think our family systems also, you know, have caused major issues. And those who've been brought up in rigid systems too have to deal with a lot of anger, you know. There's so much anger to have to. And again, look at the prodigal son, the oldest. It's actually about the older brother, not about the younger, the old story. And the older brother is so angry. He never left the father, and yet he had no intimacy with the father. He'd never experienced the kiss of the father. So isn't that amazing? You can actually be with God all your life. God's all around you, and yet you don't know him. You don't know the intimacy, you know.
Wow.
The younger son left. He left. He went and he sold everything and suddenly realized what he had and comes home and discovers an intimacy of the father that he never knew. You know?
Yeah. Wow. That also, you know, gives kind of like the reason of why we see this picture of, I guess, it's sort of the Phariseeism, you know. I'm thinking about this blind man who was healed by Jesus and then now goes and talks with the Pharisees, and then the Pharisees are angry because I don't know like how his eyes open, how he sees again, and the whole conversation is just not working out. And
So, Jay, I actually think, for those of us who grew up in the church, who haven't wandered astray, but have tried to stay the course, these sexual struggles or struggles with pornography, they can be so much more crippling and harder, because, where that child who didn't leave, and then we've just got to unpack it and realize that there were things that may have gone on before that have set us up for this.
Yeah. And this is like coming back onto what we have talked about last time as well, like the importance of us actually really getting on this journey. It is a journey, it is a journey to find.
It is a journey.
It is a journey to find that intimacy, that the thing that you have been longing for, and the areas in life where you have not experienced God or a father as wholesome, or family, or as you have been talking about, because I think it'll be very interesting also to mention this, because I remember like the times when I actually engage in pornography, when I am sinning and I'm looking at that, and I'm actually like I end up there because I'm struggling myself, right? But then as I'm there, I'm thinking like, this is boring. Like this is, I don't want this. I look at this stuff and then like it's not about trying to look for something that is more intriguing or something that is more engaging or anything like that. You just look at that and it's like I feel the emptiness that is in there,
Right.
And trying not to be insensitive about it, but I think it is also very intriguing and interesting to see what the searches in a certain type of pornography preferences and things like that also shows us about something about the missing part.
Yes.
It's
culturally, but even in my home, if I had an overbearing or controlling mother, or a father who was distant and isolated, that actually all plays into what kind of pornography I want to watch, because it will all it starts to give you clues about where there's brokenness and wounding from the past. And you're so right. We tend to just want to run away from it, but we need to look at what are we going to, what are we finding that we want to keep going back to, because very often that's going to take us to the place of cause, the place where I'm not whole and I'm not healthy, and that's where then I can get healing. So you're right. I mean, it's critical that we do that work. Like the one guy said, he said, look at your porn, look at your brokenness. What are the things that you find you want to go to rather than others? Because that's going to give you clues to your brokenness. So it's all fantasy, playing out of fantasies, of what we wished for, or we wished we had, or wish we could have.
And it's really sad. I read this article the other time where people talk about like the Google searches and the results according to regions and places and countries, and what people like, some bizarre things that people look up, because people that works with analytics and searches, like these guys are engineers. They don't really have they don't really care about what research they do and stuff. But then what the stuff that they pull up, for example, like in India, like Indian wives, they search and ask whether if it's normal thing to breastfeed their husbands, for example, and that's insane.
It's crazy.
That is insane. Like
that's crazy.
What was even more sad is like looking at that article and like how they are saying like, oh well, people have different preferences, different wants and stuff like that. But obviously the secular are not going to talk about the brokenness that is in there. And it is so sad. I think that in itself shows some sort of indication in maternity rate in India, I guess.
Well, Jay, I also think 37% of all websites on the internet are porn websites. 37%.
37%.
So 37% of the internet is porn. Think about that.
That is a lot.
If you type the word sex into a search engine, you're going to get 180 million hits.
Wow.
And what's crazy to me is that there is enough research to show how destructive pornography is to society, to families, to the fabric of everyone. You know, it's addictive. The research is all there, and yet show me any government, any lawmakers who are trying to put an end to it. You know, they call it free speech or free expression. Where are the women's rights groups, you know, the whole Me Too movement speaking against the objectification of women? It's so destructive, but there is no desire to want to deal with it.
Right.
Because it's in the heart of man.
Exactly,
you know?
Exactly. And we can't, I mean, sure, there can be some guidelines, but like we ultimately can't fix this through any legislative means or anything like that. You know, I mean, this is we're only talking about the fruits that we reap of our brokenness here.
And it is the depravity of man. And so I think, you know, when in the